If you're interested in the story behind the business headlines, check out Big Technology Podcast, my weekly show that features in-depth interviews with CEOs, researchers, and reformers in business and technology. Hi, I'm Alex Kantrowitz. I'm a longtime journalist, CNBC contributor, and the host of the show. I empty my Rolodex every Wednesday to bring you awesome episodes, so go check out Big Technology Podcast. It's available on all podcast apps. Would love to have you as a listener.
Did you know that small and medium businesses make up 98% of the global economy, but most B2B marketers still treat them as a one-size-fits-all? LinkedIn's Meet the SMB report reveals why that's a missed opportunity and how you can reach these fast-moving decision makers effectively. Learn more at linkedin.com/meet-the-SMB.
Hello and welcome to another Throwback episode. So over the last year, we've gotten a lot of new listeners and we're adding these Throwback episodes so those new listeners can see some of our older content. But before I start, I have two disclaimers. So first, these were early episodes, so please be kind when it comes to understanding that the sound quality might not be that great. But despite the sound quality, the content is still solid. So that's why we want to bring it back and reshare this content, because there's still some good gems in there. In addition to the sound, we were still trying to find our voice with regard to the format that we wanted to use. Our newer episodes are put together in a much more organized and efficient manner. So if you are a new listener and you're looking at this and you're saying to yourself, this seems unrefined, it probably is because it is unrefined, and you should check out our Monday episodes to see our more refined work. Secondly, not all of the promotions from these episodes are still active, but all of the freebies that we mention are still active. Lastly, make sure you go to the website and download our Ultimate Negotiation Guide, or you could do it by clicking the link in the description. The link that we're sending you to is www.americannegotiationinstitute.com/guide. Again, that's americannegotiationinstitute.com/guide. This is a 19-page free guide. It's actually, I guess that's more like an ebook, really. And this guide will walk you through your most difficult conflicts and negotiations. And it includes our 3 most popular freebies: the Salary Negotiation Guide, the Negotiation Preparation Guide, and the Conflict Resolution Guide. So make sure you take the time to download this as soon as possible. And now, without further ado, let's jump into the episode.
Welcome to the American Negotiation Institute's podcast, where we will teach you the skills you need to get more out of life. And now your host, Kwame Christian.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of our podcast series. This is going to be a very exciting episode because it is our first interview episode. And so in today's interview, I'm interviewing my good friend, John Halverstadt. He is, I guess we could call him a serial entrepreneur. He has his hands in a lot of different businesses. So John is a realtor. He's also part owner of a real estate investment company with his brother. He's also part owner of a pharmaceutical company and part owner of a company that builds pipes for semi-trucks. And so it's really interesting to see how he's able to use his military experience, legal and business background to parlay that into business success in other areas. And of course, what's most fascinating to me is how he's able to use his negotiation skills to achieve business success and manage the critical relationships in his life. This episode is a lot of fun because not only are you going to get some great negotiating advice from a successful entrepreneur, you're also going to get some good business advice. So let's get right into it. So I am here now with my good friend John Halverstadt. We went to law school together where we dominated the intramural basketball league, winning in our 3L year, or my 3L year. And,
Our greatest combined achievement, I believe.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I would say so. Until we get this house off the market. That'll be the next one. So as you can tell from that, John is also my realtor. He sold us our first house, and now we are getting out of our first house. And so yeah, John and I go way back. So if you want to just go ahead and give a little background on you, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm from Salem, Ohio, which is on the east side. My family's been there a long time, and went to Bowling Green undergrad. At one point, I wanted to be a history professor, but I spent some time with some grad students there, and definitely decided that that was not necessarily what I wanted to spend my 20s doing. So after a couple fits and starts, I lived all over the country. I lived in LA, lived in New York, I lived in North Carolina. I went back to something that I had been thinking about for years and years, and actually in December of 2007, I signed up for the Army to go to officer candidate school. I left for basic training in February of 2008. And then by April of 2009, I was in Iraq. And I spent a year there, short a couple weeks. And then while I was there, I thought about what I wanted to do. I knew the way the reserves were going at that time. They deployed people a lot, especially officers. So I decided to go to grad school, and I applied to Ohio State. Got in through the fact that I was a veteran, in my opinion. Did a little negotiation on Dean Northern, the admissions dean there. I tried to charm her as much as humanly possible. I did my first year at law school. Wasn't so sure about it. My first real interest was real estate as far as business-wise, and I thought maybe I could get into that. I already had my classes completed to be a real estate agent, so my thought was I'd finish law school, but start selling real estate along the way. Of course, at that point, the military intervened after my first year of law school, and I decided to volunteer for my next deployment because I knew they were going to come to get me eventually. And your deployments are kind of like planning a pregnancy. I mean, you're going to be gone for a year, so you just need to figure it out. So I spent the next 3 semesters in Afghanistan, and then I came back, re-entered law school, and at that point, I started selling real estate full-time, but I also decided I want to get my MBA at Ohio State. So I went and applied for that, again, put on that veteran charm, and got into there, despite having not the greatest packet, and went there for a whole year, and then split time between the two and graduated in December of 2015 with my law degree and MBA. So it was a good time, 5 years, a lot of stress, but worthwhile. The last couple years there, when I was going to the law school and the business school, I started selling real estate, and now, as of this month, I have probably about 120 closings and about 16.5 million in sales as far as volume.
It's pretty solid.
So yeah, it's nice. My proudest achievement is probably graduating debt free.
That's awesome.
I'm here right now.
That's awesome. Well, congrats, man. That's great. So you don't only do real estate though, because obviously you're really successful at that. 16 million is nothing to laugh at, but you also have your hand in other businesses too, right?
Yeah, I think anyone can do the stuff that I've done so far. I think anyone can join the military. Anyone can go to grad school. Those aren't really that outstanding. It's the thing that I'm interested in is being a financially successful business guy. Mm-hmm. I want to take care of my family and other things, but to me, not everyone can do that. And so that's the one thing that I've been focusing on and for a long time. I felt like I was building a packet to do that. Mm-hmm. So I don't think of myself as a realtor. I think of as a business person whose one business is selling real estate.
Nice.
And so the skills, what I'm hoping is the skills that I got from grad school and the military, because I was a diplomacy officer, so part of my job was talking to local nationals and negotiations.
Right.
Take that experience and then the business real estate experience, kind of combine them all together, so that I could get into other things and other businesses, and kind of be a generalist. That's the world will tell you that you need specialists for everything, and they're right about a lot of things. But I've met a lot of very successful generalists.
Mm-hmm.
And I think specialists tend to get paid by the hour by someone. Generalists tend to own things.
Interesting. Interesting.
In my opinion,
Right.
Hey you, I'm Andrew Seaman. Do you want a new job? Or do you want to move forward in your career? Well, you should listen to my weekly show called Get Hired with Andrew Seaman. We talk about it all, and it's waiting for you, yes you, wherever you get your podcasts.
Small and medium businesses don't have time to waste, and neither do marketers trying to reach them. On LinkedIn, more SMB decision makers are actively looking for new solutions to help them grow, whether it's software or financial services. Our Meet the SMB report breaks down how these businesses buy and what really influences their choices. Learn more at linkedin.com/meet-the-SMB. That's linkedin.com/meet-the-SMB.
So my father was a very big, he owned several businesses, and so that's just kind of where my mindset is
Right.
Taking skills and see if I can't leverage them into places, little niches, where I can work on, creating value, and then taking that value and putting it in other places,
Right.
leveraging up and moving stuff around to create kind of a portfolio of financial success,
Right. That's interesting though, because I like what you said about being a generalist, but from what I know and the businesses that you're in, even though your skill set is general, the businesses that you decide to get into are very specific, very niche-y.
Right. Yeah. And I think I like businesses. This is not my idea. This is really Warren Buffett's idea.
Mm-hmm.
He likes businesses with high barriers to entry.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking a little while ago about Kinder Morgan, which is a business he just invested in, and I happened to invest in it before he did. Thank God. So I got a little value there. But Kinder Morgan, they're a big pipeline company, and they've been getting killed on their stock price because oil prices are low.
Mm-hmm.
But they own this giant pipe system, this infrastructure that moves gas all over the country, and it's impossible to replicate.
Right.
It would take over probably $1 billion to build, and then however much for all the legal and the EPA and everything. Mm-hmm. So even though what they're moving right now as far as gas is not expensive and their rates are down, they are untouchable. I mean, you can't necessarily get into competition with them.
Right.
And so with what I'm thinking about and doing over the last couple months and years as I try to spread my wings a little bit further in business, I'm trying to find those kind of niches where it's hard for people to compete with me or my partners on stuff.
Right.
So.
Okay, so what kind of businesses then, other than the real estate, have you found yourself in?
Well, I mean, the first one besides selling real estate is we also invest in real estate. My brother and I do.
Okay, yeah.
That requires cash, and it requires the ability to get loans from banks, which is something that not everyone else can do. But if you think about it a different way, you're in a competition with your other landlords in like a general sense, but there's no landlord that's going to hold and own every single building.
Right.
So you have competitors, but not in the strictest sense. You could say that tenants are a finite resource, but in any city, there's several, if not dozens, of people that make very good livings in real estate. So it's a broad market in the sense that anyone can get into it. You don't have to have any special training, but then it gets kind of narrow because then you do have to have that financial piece.
Right.
So that's the first thing we're really into, and we've been doing it for a while, and there's some pretty interesting developments for us. It takes a while to get running in real estate, but once you do, investing-wise, it becomes kind of a financial engine. Every bit of cash flow you add to your monthly cash flow means you can buy other stuff and grow it out.
Right.
The biggest negotiation with that is getting a bank to go along with you. Banks were burned by the financial crisis, so they're a little bit scared of single-family small portfolios. So you get kind of limited in the money you can borrow, no matter how solvent you are.
So when it comes to negotiating with the banks, trying to get them on board, a lot of times when people deal with banks, they see, okay, these are the rates. It's kind of a yes or no type of thing.
Right.
So how are you able to get flexibility with those institutions?
I don't want to say that I have open contempt for banks, but I have nearly open contempt for banks.
Okay.
Winston Churchill, I believe, was the one that said that, a bank is the kind of friend who will lend you an umbrella when it's sunny outside and then ask for it back when it rains. They are in the business of making money off money, right? They're in the business of generating interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they have an attitude where they feel like they're doing you a favor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not how it is. You're doing them a favor. They need to lend money.
Right.
So I learned from my dad, he told the story about when he first started buying rental property. That's where I was around it. I would clean up his places when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
He drew out a list of assets. Like, this is the stuff I have. And he would just go to different banks. He would shop his, I have these 2 houses, and I want a loan for a third.
Right.
Will you do it or won't you do it? And if they wouldn't do it, well, too bad.
Yeah.
So you should start with the banks where you have relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We've built a relationship with a local bank where our stuff is, our property.
Right.
But you always want to be on the lookout for other stuff because other banks have different, they have different boards, they have different risk tolerances, they have different, appetites for different kinds of loans.
Right.
And we're getting kind of near the point where we might actually pull off all of our loans from the bank that we've been working with because another bank is offering us better rates or,
that's interesting.
more access. So initially it's going to suck. I mean, you have to put a lot of money down to get in real estate, 30, 40%. So you want to start with like small properties. But the negotiation is don't go in there on bended knee. I mean, you're a business person. They're a business person. They can treat you with respect. You can treat them with respect. But they're not doing you a favor.
Right.
And I think when it comes to negotiation, I'm very good when people talk to me on an even plane, or talk to me like a fellow adult.
Right.
I'm not good when people talk down to me, and therefore I don't like to talk down to other people. But if you start, if they start with the attitude a little bit, that's the hardest moment because your instinct is to also give it back. But if the key is to get the loan or to get the deal done, then you don't want to do that. You as Professor Daly said at Ohio State, one of our real estate professors, you want to be a deal maker, not a deal killer. So if the bank's snotty, don't give it back to them. See if they'll still do it.
Right.
If you're trying to buy a property and they say the other agent or the seller is being annoying, the intent is to get the house that you want, not get back at the seller. Because once you're done, whatever the stress is of the negotiation, you have what you want at the end of the day.
Right.
If I get a loan from a bank, and even if the guy's a total jerk or incompetent, I still get the loan. I get to move my business forward.
Right.
If my clients are buying a house and the seller's being ridiculous, and they won't repair something or whatever, is it worth them, refusing to do a $500 repair and terminating the contract? Or is it, do you say, yeah, they're being stupid here, but at the end of the day, we get this house that we want exactly for $500 more. It's
right. Yeah.
You got to kind of think what the end goal is and then work back from there.
Yeah.
And rarely does anger help you get to the end goal.
Right. That's interesting. So, essentially, it's like when somebody is giving you that attitude and you feel the urge to give it back.
Yeah.
What focuses you is focusing on your goals, what you want at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's I'm not good. I'm not great at it all the time. I try to pride myself on being patient with people, and I like people. I generally love, my friends and everyone else, and most people. I love, that kind of fabric of society when you open doors for people, and you say sir and ma'am, and you're polite. That stuff's very important to me, and I like that. But when people kind of turn it on you, you have to. I hate to use this cliche thing, but it's you can be better than that,
right?
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you're getting the house that you want or whatever you're getting, and they move on, and they're still going to be miserable.
Right.
Like there's no reason to match their level of misery. Anger is just misery manifesting itself in some way. Like no one's just naturally angry. They're miserable about something.
Right.
They're a bureaucrat that hates their job, or their spouse owns their life, or there's always usually something to make people bitter. And you don't have to match them.
Right.
I sometimes a little perspective helps. So sometimes I'll say when someone's negotiating hard, or when it's a stressful situation, and they'll say, "Well, how are you? Are you stressed out?" I say to people, "It's better than getting shot at," because being a veteran, there was a couple times that people would have liked to have shot me. So
right. Jeez.
There's nothing here that's that severe. So yeah, they want to beat me up over $500 or whatever. Okay, but I'm still getting to that end goal.
Right.
And that's really the focus.
That's good. That's a really great point.
Yeah, getting to the end goal with the most amount of peace. The most amount of peace in your gut. Because that's where the stress to me goes. When you get stressed out, it's down in your gut and you feel it roiling. And you're just angry. You can just go around it. You're angry? Okay, whatever. Well, here are the actual facts. Here's the reality of what we need to get. And just go around,
Right. That's good advice. So how do you use negotiation and dispute resolution in your other businesses? Because I think it's pretty obvious with real estate.
Yeah.
But,
So we've got this, we have a little manufacturing company that makes a certain kind of hose that's used for semis. And we're kind of struggling to get it off onto its feet. It's already had sales and it has like a volume, but it's not like grown like we were hoping. But we've had a subcontractor that makes the hoses for us, and they've been making them for us for years. And it's just a lot of back and forth. And, in the military, when I was in the military, like as an officer, you have a lot of, NCOs, your non-commissioned officers, they're enlisted folks that work their way up in the ranks. Most of them are super capable. But some of them are a little more, construction foreman types, a little more blue collar. And they're used to speaking their mind pretty bluntly, and at times they can make themselves or make you aware of how they feel about something in a very direct way.
That's a nice way to say it.
Yeah. So, how do you motivate a guy like that, or how do you not control, but how do you get a guy like that to do his job? Well, to me, again, you don't want to match his anger and intensity. You want to follow through on your end, so he knows that you're not just hot air and fluff. Because those people like that have a real detector for when you're full of it. Because there's the guys that talk a big game, and then there's the guys that actually are out walking the patrols. Right. And so the same with this business. If our people, maybe they aren't they might not have graduate degrees and college degrees and everything, but they do sense who you are and what you mean. So how do you keep them happy and motivated? You try to follow through with what you say. You want to, you don't want to overpromise, underdeliver. You want to speak directly to them, And I think a lot of it, to me, negotiation is being responsive. If a guy in any business calls me and I don't call him back in 2 days, then what am I doing?
Right.
And social media and email and these electronic communications, they're a crutch in a sense. They help us in one sense, and they hurt us in another sense.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many conflicts that would be ended if people would just get on the phone or meet in person.
Mm-hmm. I like that point. So, in your experience, can you kind of give an example of when somebody wanted to engage in like online or maybe email when it should have been more personal communication?
Yeah, I mean, it happens with other realtors all the time. It also happens. Okay, another business I'm working with. We're trying to get into this space where we're a veteran-owned company, like I'm a veteran, and we're trying to contract with the government on some stuff.
Right.
And there's a certain office within the government that kind of controls this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're having a conference, and I wanted to go to the conference to like present ourselves because it's huge to get face-to-face contact again.
Absolutely.
They initially allowed us to schedule it, but our paperwork's not totally complete. We're waiting on a couple more certifications to be ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And Lady said, hey, I don't think it's not a good use of our time to have you here. Now, the first thought in my mind is like, well, I'm going to have these certifications in 2 weeks after this conference. I'm going to have these certifications. I'm going to be bidding, So that's like the first thing is like you get a little angry, like you're annoyed, like my situation because I've talked to you before about it, like with her. So the first instinct is to get angry, and the second instinct is to resend the, what I think of as like the 1 minute email.
Mm-hmm.
Where you email back like immediately and you just get all flustered.
Right.
Which doesn't help your business, doesn't help your business partners, doesn't help her, and it doesn't help you.
Right.
It helps no one.
Mm-hmm.
So I replied to her. I said, I waited a little bit, and I replied to her. I said, I understand your point. I don't want to waste your time. Your time is very important. And by the way, this is all of it is true, but it also has the effect of me trying to get her on my side.
Right.
A little butter doesn't hurt anyone.
Mm-hmm.
You might as well try to make friends along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, I explained all that, and I said, this was a couple weeks ago, I said, give us another week, and we'll see where our permits are, like our certifications we're looking for. And then, if we're not there, then we'll cancel,
Right.
So that was 2 days ago. And I called her, and we talked, and we weren't quite where she wanted us to be. And I said, okay, that's fine, we'll cancel, but I want you to know that we'll probably have these in May, like it's coming. And so I didn't get exactly what I wanted, but she knows that I'm 1, reasonable, 2, I'm not quick to anger, 3, I'm respectful, and 4, we want to do things the right way.
Right.
So that's almost a better impression than going. It was in Kansas. It's almost a better impression than driving to Kansas.
That's what I really like that example.
Right.
Because, 1, it shows how these skills can be utilized in these almost everyday circumstances.
Right.
It's not just like the big obvious deals that you're trying to you get, but it's these little everyday circumstances where this is beneficial. And 2, you didn't get what you wanted, but you were able to figure out where you could still get value from this interaction. And that's huge.
And maybe nothing turned out from it. Maybe you shouldn't even notice.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't hit home runs or you can't score if you're not playing in the game.
Right.
I
like that a lot.
Well, no, think about it. It's kind of a worn out cliche, but if you think about a baseball team, the more guys you put on through walks and it's like sabermetrics baseball, the more chance you have of scoring runs.
Right.
The more polite you are to people, the more respectful, the less flustered you seem, the more willing you are to, turn on a little charm every once in a while, but, just be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
The more chances you have of scoring runs.
Right.
Because people are, even if you don't believe in karma, it's just people want to work with people they like.
Right. I like that a lot because one theory of negotiation is that we're always in a negotiation at some point.
Yep.
Because there's not a definite starting point for the negotiation. It doesn't start like when we come to the proverbial negotiating table.
Yeah.
So it's like you started that negotiation with her a while back, and that charm that you put on, it's going to carry value when you actually get to the table to get what you want later too.
Yeah, so she told us like government contracting, there's a little bit of a presumption that you have at least 2 years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
But because of my business partner, he's got experience where we're trying to bid, so he's not with my company or our company, but it's with another company, so he has an experience there.
Yeah.
So I explained it to her. And I eventually got her, we were talking, and she said, all I care about is the price of what you try to deliver. That's all I care about. Which is huge for us.
Right.
That doesn't, it just, literally that means we are down to one metric.
Right. Wow.
Now, so maybe she would have said that anyway if I was a big jerk about everything.
Mm-hmm.
But, if these people are control points that you want to get through, if you're a contracting officer and someone calls you and is difficult to deal with, I'm sensing they probably can invent ways to keep you from getting business.
Right.
I don't know. I've seen too much where people that are good with other people end up doing well.
Right. And that intel that you got is invaluable.
Right.
Because when you come to the negotiating table, you always want to, when you're strategizing beforehand, you want to figure out what the person's interests are. What is it that makes them tick? And she clearly just said one thing. Yeah. A lot of times with most people, it's multiple things that you need to figure out. But that's powerful.
Now, obviously, we got to still source the product and everything. But she's saying if this number is hit, then we will work with you, and that's huge to hear. One thing that I think is really big, because I've taken a fair amount of negotiating classes.
Yeah. One
thing I think is huge, and it's it can be in your personal life, it can be anywhere, is if it is a multi-point negotiation. There's 12 things that you care about. 3 of those might be important to the other side that don't matter to you, but you can make a bigger show of giving those up to get what you then want. Right?
I like that. Elaborate on that a little bit more.
So, like, think in your domestic life. Say you and your wife have, like, 5 things that need to get done. And the one that you care about least is taking out the trash.
Right.
But she's a neat freak, and it's important to her, right? And you might care about something else. You can make not a big show, but you can make it clear that you are diligent in taking out the trash.
Yeah. And
that little bit of leverage can get you over to what you want from her.
Right.
It's like, it's just basic compromise, and there's a lot of negotiation kind of fact patterns where you'll see that, where something's huge to you and it doesn't matter to the other side. And if you can work around it, you can build enough goodwill to get what you want,
Right.
And I just think that's all day, every day,
Yeah.
Especially as a realtor. Those other people might care about, they might care about their move out date more than they care about the price.
Yeah.
There might be something you don't even know. So you got to kind of figure out, what the other side really wants. And it might not mean anything to you.
Right. So it's all about trading things of unequal value to create overall value for the deal. That's cool. So how do you go about finding that?
I mean, we can talk about, like, in the real estate sense, because it's probably the one that everyone deals with the most. You got to kind of do your research about what is trying to be bought or sold. If I am looking at a very hot neighborhood at a very hot property, that frames what I know the other side is looking for.
Interesting.
So let's say I'm the buyer. I'm the buyer's agent. I have clients that want to buy in a very hot neighborhood. And this house comes into market. And every house in this neighborhood is sold in 1 or 2 days. I know by experience that listing agent, the one that's selling the house, they're going to want a clean offer, which means not like a bunch of weird terms, we want the blinds and, we want to move in 75 days. Or when you see sometimes is, our contract is contingent on us selling our own home. They don't want to deal with that. They want a clean offer. They want to know that in 45 days this house is going to close.
Right. Interesting.
Least amount of stress on their side.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to want, I focus on getting the whole packet of paperwork together to send over immediately. Because that other agent doesn't want to chase me down for paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
You know? They want the least amount of stress there. They want to know that the packet is complete. And it also makes us look professional.
Right.
As a like here's our property disclosure, here's our agency disclosure, here's our contract, here's our pre-approval letter. Here is every single thing you need to complete this contract today.
Right.
That helps make it clean. And then, you're not it depends on how hot the market is, but you got to come ready to buy.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say, we're going to take 15% off the purchase price. It's not worth anyone's time.
Right.
In many instances in Columbus right now, it's not worth it to go 5% off or 2% off.
Yeah.
You gotta come out firing.
Mm-hmm.
Now on the other side, if the market's not as hot, then it's a different framing. You can ask for some more stuff. You can have a home sale contingency contract. You can ask for some furniture, or so it frames what you're looking at.
Right.
Because if a house has been on the market 200 days, the thing that's come to the fore for them is price.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're thinking, oh my God, this is day 200. This thing might never sell.
Mm-hmm.
So that, before the negotiation even starts, that's the framing. Is what's our context here?
Right.
What is happening in this market? How many people? If I'm for example like a neighborhood here, Clintonville, if it's a 3-bedroom, 1.5 full bath, half bath house with a 2-car garage, there are probably at least 100 active buyers searching for that house right now.
Wow.
Yeah. So everyone's looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you become one out of 100?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So one thing that I think that's really interesting about you as an entrepreneur is that you have a very diverse portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the real estate, real estate investment with your brother. You have the that pipe business.
Yeah.
And the pharmaceutical business.
Yeah.
So for you as kind of like a generalist, how were you able to get into such a diverse portfolio with partners? Like, why were they able to look at you and say you would be of value?
I was thinking about this yesterday. I don't think I have any strong skills, really. I'm not
Okay.
really good. I'm not good at Excel. Accounting's not my thing. But the thing is, none of these businesses would happen without me.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean about me?
Right.
I think the human element, making the partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
Making the connections, allows me to get into niches,
Mm-hmm.
with people that already are there.
Right.
And then having an appetite for risk. When people invest with me, they know my money's involved.
Right.
I'm not asking in for free. Like I'm cutting someone a check.
Mm-hmm.
Or the pharmacy business you discussed. I mean, I signed the lease. I mean, and I'm a majority owner of that. And that actually is only because we're trying to be better known, so I have to own 51% of it.
Right.
But that means that, I have to do all that stuff. It's kind of that, I guess it would be human relationships and an appetite for risk, and then just perseverance, like putting together all the packets of all the paperwork and dealing with all the rigmarole that you have to go through to start a business.
Right.
So that's where I think that's how I was able to do it. Is I try to identify people I believe in, and then figure out how we can help each other.
Yeah.
And to me, that's absolutely paramount. When you hear these stories in Silicon Valley of people working together that hate each other, I don't get how you do that. I don't want to work with people I don't like.
Right.
There's a lot of that in the military, and it's not that fun.
Right. I would imagine.
Right. So I don't want to take away from the American Negotiation Institute, but the book that really framed my approach to people in a lot of ways was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah. Classic.
The classic. I mean, I love like the old stories in it. And, I mean, it's ridiculously written book in some way because it was written in the 30s, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like the basics of how that works, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I talk differently to every single person in my life.
Oh, that's fascinating. So explain that one too.
Well, I know what people that I'm close with now.
Mm-hmm.
I know what makes every single person tick, I think, for the most part,
mm-hmm.
in my life. And so I talk to them about the things that they enjoy or, you know. My one business partner, Patrick, you know, he like loves Cleveland sports, and he's like an Irish guy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of A-types together, you know, like Irish sports, Cleveland kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And my other business partner, Scott, he openly loathes sports. So I don't, you know, I'm not talking to him about the Indians.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to him about what he's interested in.
Right.
You know? So, and it goes on from there. You know, there's some story in that book about this guy, this very kind of famous guy, is sitting next to a lady, and they start talking about sailing. And they talk about sailing for like an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets up and leaves to go somewhere, and this person was sitting there next to another friend, and she said, I didn't realize he was a big sailor. And she's like, he's never been sailing his entire life.
Wow.
You know, the only reason he was doing that was because that lady wanted to talk about it.
Right.
So you engage people on what they like.
Right.
You know? So, like, for example, if it's like like an older person,
mm-hmm.
you know, they came from an era of America where there's a little more respect and politeness,
mm-hmm.
if you will.
Yeah.
So I make sure that they understand that I respect my elders, you know,
mm-hmm.
and I let them know how I feel about it, and you know, generally people respond to that, you know.
Right.
You show them respect. If it's a younger person, I don't know. I sometimes struggle with younger people because I don't know quite what they're thinking or doing. But you know, again, they're still first-time home buyers I've had that, you know, they're very new to the process.
Mm-hmm.
I try to make it clear that, of course, you can ask questions. This is a big financial transaction. That's why I'm a professional. That's why I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make you as comfortable as I can make you. Sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable, but that's why I'm here.
Right.
And if you deal with some people in a professional context, they make it seem like they're doing you a favor.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever want my clients or business partners to think that they're doing me a favor. You know?
Right. That's interesting. So when it comes to the partnerships that you have, beyond connecting with them and understanding what makes them tick and making them feel comfortable, when it comes down to that hard conversation where it's like, okay, I like you, you like me, we think we can make this business work. When it comes to dividing the pie, how do you go about having that conversation?
Well, who put the most money in?
Mm-hmm.
Or who's putting the money in? Are there exterior, you know, framing that we have to worry about? Like, for example, with this veteran thing, like I have to own 51%.
Right.
Is who's going to be working on it most?
Mm-hmm.
Full time, you know, who's working full time, who's working part time,
right?
Who's not working at all? And I think, you know, that's really maybe who's most valuable.
And how do you determine value?
Well, if you're starting an auto shop with a mechanic and you're outside money, right? Mm-hmm. There's probably a good chance the mechanic's going to ask for a little bit of a promote over what he put in.
Right.
He's going to ask for more than his financial share.
Yeah. Because
the business doesn't exist without him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, you know, value. Like, if he walks away, then you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, you know, if you see like, if you have an inventor, you know, like those Silicon Valley types, you know, these guys get diluted, obviously, the founders and stuff.
Right.
But if it's an initial stage company, like, you gotta have them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're the ones that have the idea.
Right.
You know, they might not be good at the management of a company, but they're good at the creation of the idea that leads to a company that needs to be managed.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the characteristics you're looking for on how the pie is divided.
Yeah, that's cool. One thing, because I know we're coming up on time here, I wanted to ask how it was getting into a family business when you're not part of the family. Because I know we want to keep it as objective as possible, but whenever you're at family, that's always tough.
I wanted to make it clear to the brothers that I wasn't trying to steal anything and that I would, work. There are certain tensions that existed before I even knew anyone that are going to remain.
Yeah.
So, you try to be kind of a neutral arbiter on some of that stuff, so that you're not co-opted in one of the parties.
Yeah.
So that you become not an enemy, but some sort of an adversary. You want to be outside. I try to do that all the time, actually. I don't want to really become a partisan. Like if there's a big discussion about something, I like to be objective about it. Maintain an independent voice. So that means listening to both sides. Then you got to listen to both sides.
Right.
So I don't really necessarily have a good answer for how to do that, but it's just I think again, being calm, being respectful, and keeping a focus on what it is. It is to everyone's benefit to have a successful company.
Right.
So let's not get distracted by petty squabbles that at the end of the day don't really mean anything.
Right. That makes sense.
We only have so much time on this earth. Why are you relitigating an issue from 10 years ago?
Right. And another thing I found interesting too is that, like you said, you don't want to be partisan and seem like you're favoring either side. And a lot of times when we utilize these dispute resolution skills, it's not a situation where you're directly involved. Sometimes you have to be that third party mediator.
Yeah.
To make the situation livable for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that there is nothing worth doing that doesn't have conflict. I mean, there's going to be unsolvable conflict.
Yeah.
I don't. I think there's this mediation is very important, but sometimes you're just going to go to war, man. I mean, you're gonna, and so how do you kind of pick those spots wisely? How do you keep that from not ruining what you've got going on overall? And it's kind of going through that process I've talked about, where you be calm and you think, objective about what's going on, and you try to remain respectful. But sometimes there's going to be no perfect solution. To me, it's the solution that gets us across the finish line.
Right.
So, hey, person that's upset, you give a little bit here. Person that's upset, you give a little bit here. You might not be happy, but instead of stopping, we're moving forward.
Yeah.
And in most cases, except politics, that usually works.
Right. Right. That's interesting. So, that's another great point. Because you said you might not be happy, but happiness isn't the goal at the end of a negotiation or mediation or something. It's progress.
Right.
Moving forward. That's cool. Okay, so let's end with this. If you had one tip to give to entrepreneurs about negotiation or dispute resolution skills, like what would it be? Like what was one of the things that was key to you?
One tip. How long is it? Is it allowed to be a compound sentence?
Yes, it can be a compound sentence.
I would say the one tip that I have is to assess what the end result that you're looking for is. So assess what the end result is, and then have that frame everything else. So think of your target end date. What is it? What do I want to happen? What is this thing that's going to be? And then work back from there.
Nice.
To today.
Yeah.
And that will get you away from the petty bickering.
Right.
I know that in 45 days I want to sell this. There's going to be a closing. My clients are going to get the house they want if I'm the buyer's agent, or my clients are going to get out of a house that they don't want anymore if I'm the listing agent. I'm going to get a commission check. They're going to get to move on with their lives, and I'm going to get to move on with my lives. So that's the framing. That's the end result. That's the goal that I want to have.
Right.
Everything else in the middle, I've dealt with some tremendously unlikable people.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's only 45 days.
Right.
They're not my roommate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to ever see them again.
Right.
You know, so this is where I want to go. And then I just come back, and then if there's a big stressful moment, it sucks, but you work through it. Identify your end goal. You know, I can tell you what my end goal is right now in my life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want to be financially successful. I want to take care of my family, and I want to live independently. Those are the things that I want.
Right.
Then we can start working back, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I've already been working through it, you know? That was my goal when I was 22 or 3. You know, I've already put stuff in place, the grad school, the military, the savings, the beginning of the businesses. I've already done that portion of it. Now I'm in that middle phase.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my 30s. It's time to start working on being financially successful and taking care of my family, you know?
Right.
So if you have that goal in mind, it frames everything that happens before it.
Right. I like it. Well, thank you very much for being our first successful podcast interview. I had a lot of fun with this. Hope you did too.
Yeah, I love podcasts, and I've never thought I was actually going to be on one, so I enjoyed it, and I hope someone learned something.
Yeah, man, definitely. This was really great information. I know I enjoyed the interview, but I also enjoyed the insight that you provided, because this information that you gave is really actionable, and the entrepreneurs in the audience that are listening to this story and seeing how you were able to utilize these skills and achieve business success, I think that's really encouraging, and it will be instructive for us as we step outside of the podcast world and start to go back to our business lives again. So there it is, podcast number 3 done and interview number 1 done. Before we go, I want to recap some of his top 3 points that I really enjoyed. The first one is getting perspective. When the going gets tough in negotiations and people are being difficult, or in general, if people are being difficult with you, being able to take a step back and look at the whole picture and focus on your goals, I think that was a great piece of insight from John. Another thing that was great was how he focused on relationships and people throughout his career, and understanding that he needs to maintain good relationships with everybody, because you never know when somebody is going to become valuable, and not in a slimy kind of manipulative way, but in a I genuinely care about people kind of way, and treating everybody with respect and kindness throughout the way is one of his keys to success. And lastly, always keeping the end in mind, whether he's making business decisions or strategic decisions within negotiations or conversations, he uses the end goal to determine which move to make. And this is great, actionable advice for all of us as entrepreneurs. As always, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. And if you have any questions or topics you want me to handle, shoot me an email. My email is in the description. Also, if you have suggestions or feedback for me, please send that as well, because I'm always trying to get better. And if you like this, find it entertaining or helpful, please subscribe and leave us a good rating and share it with your friends. I will catch you in the next one.